Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli back out here in the shop. And man, we've got a good one for you today. And in today's shop, we're gonna be talking about the swim jig, but specifically, we're gonna talk about how to select the right retrieve when using that bait. Swim jigs are so great because they're a versatile lure. And a swim jig is basically a skirted jig. A lot of them will have an inline line tie style. And these are baits that can come through cover extremely well. But a swim jig is not a lure that's as easy as throwing out and reeling it back. It's not that easy. And in today's shop, I really want to break down my two main ways that I'm going to retrieve this swim jig, okay? So we're really going to break down the retrieve and then a little bit of the trailer too, because depending on those retrieves, I'm going to switch my trailers, all right? Let's start with the swim jig itself. A lot of good swim jigs on the market, guys. This is one that I've been using the last few years that I really, really love. This is the brand new Missile Mini Swim Jig. It's a more compact swim jig. And as I mentioned, if you look at it, a lot of these swim jigs have some similarities. If you look at that Missile Mini Swim, it's got an inline line tie that's slightly recessed, that's slightly pulled back in the head. The great thing about that is that's going to let us get this bait through cover, right? Through cover and over cover. We want this thing to come through grass and wood and trees and boat docks, posts and ropes. This is a really important bait when we're fishing around cover. So inline line tie, slightly integrated. And then the other thing on a swim jig, if you look at the head, I love these swim jigs that have a little broader head on the bottom. And that head is actually going to catch the water to help it run true and track true. But as the water hits it, it's going to give it just a very slight left and right. Just that little left-right movement. And that's a good retrieve, a good head movement when that swim jig is swimming. Okay? We've got a rubber skirt on there, silicone skirt. We've got a weed guard, super sharp hook. And then last but not least, pick a swim jig that has a nice keeper barb on the shank of the hook. Okay. Now I want to get into the two different retrieve styles. And one is called swimming a swim jig. That one makes a lot of sense. Swimming a swim jig. And the second one is called the Alabama shake, which is more of popping a swim jig, okay? Both of those retrieves make this thing come alive, right? A swim jig on its own is only so good. These two retrieves are the magic of what makes these bass bite a swim jig. So the two retrieves, swimming and the Alabama shake. All right, let's start with swimming and when I'm going to fish the swimming technique, what trailers I'm going to use, and then I'll show you the retrieve with the rod and reel. Okay, so swimming a swim jig is the technique we're going to use when the cover is submerged. Okay? Real easy. So listen to this, guys. When you're fishing cover that's submerged, cover that's under the water, we're going to use the swimming retrieve. So types of submerged cover: submergent vegetation, right? Submergent vegetation, milfoil, hydrilla, coontail, cabbage, eelgrass, any of that grass that grows below the surface off the bottom, we're going to use the swimming technique. So submerged cover, but submerged cover could also be rocks, stumps, brush piles, Anything that we're fishing that's below the surface of the water, we're going to use the swimming retrieve. When I'm using the swimming retrieve, I want a trailer that has more of a side-to-side swimming action, okay? So submerged cover, swimming retrieve, and a trailer with a swimming action. And 100%, two of my favorite trailers for the swim jig when I'm swimming it are swim bait style trailers. So tab tail swim baits like a Power Swimmer. This is one of my favorites. This is a Berkley Power Bait Grass Pig. We got the full size, we got the junior. And then a good old school one, my second trailer for when I'm swimming is an old school grub. This is a 3 or a 4-inch Berkley Power Grub. It's just a curl tail grub. And like the swim bait, like that grass pig, when I'm swimming, the bait has a fluid swimming motion. Okay? Now, this retrieve is all subsurface, and these two trailers help to activate the movement of that bait. Okay? So swimming when the cover's submerged, and in swimming, this is the easier of the two retrieves. We're literally casting that swim jig out, clicking over, we're letting it get down to the level of the submerged cover, okay? So shallow water, 3 feet, we're hardly letting it sink at all. And we're starting our retrieve. Deeper water, if you're fishing a brush pile that's in 15 feet, cast the swim jig out there, let it get down. Count it down 15 seconds, 10 seconds. And then once it's at the level of the cover, here it goes. You ready? We're just swimming it back. We're swimming it back. We're trying to contact the cover. So as we swim that lure back, as we reel it in, and generally I'm using a medium to medium slow retrieve, I'm trying to swim it into the cover. So if that's a treetop and I'm swimming it, I'm trying to hit the treetop and keep it swimming. If it's milfoil, hydrilla, I'm swimming it, trying to contact it and keep it swimming. The one thing that I like to do is during that retrieve, especially when I'm not hitting cover, so during the swimming retrieve, especially when I'm not hitting cover, as I medium retrieve it, I throw one little pop into it every once in a while, just to get that bait to change direction if there's nothing to hit. So swimming a jig for submerged cover. Remember, you want a trailer that's a swimming type of trailer, a grass pig, a grub, lures that swim under the water, okay? Great technique for submerged cover, swimming a jig. But there's another retrieve for a swim jig that's just as good, that is so good at drawing strikes. But this one we're going to use for emerged cover, right? Emerged cover, emergent grass like reeds, bank grass, willow grass, lily pads, hay grass, kissimmee grass, emergent grass, but other emerged cover as well. Matted sticks that are matted together, vines, standing timber where the fish are relating to the branches sticking out of the water, right? So any kind of cover that is emerged, the cover that's on the surface of the water, we're not going to swim the jig. We're going to use the Alabama shake. And the Alabama shake is going to let us keep that jig contacting the emergent cover, especially that emergent grass, and it's going to draw strikes to it almost like a topwater, okay? So we're going to use the Alabama Shake. But let me tell you the difference in trailers as well. We're gonna look at the Retrieve in a second. But in the Alabama Shake, I don't want to use swimming trailers. I want to use trailers that are flapping trailers. I want to use a trailer that's actually going to slap the water or contact the surface of the water, okay? And I've got two of my favorite trailers for the Alabama Shake are crawfish style trailers, okay? So the Berkley Pit Boss, the Berkley Chigger Crawl. So crawfish style trailers, and if you look at that, look at the difference, right? Like it's obvious, but look at it. There's that power swimmer, tab tail, swimming tail for swimming a jig, flapping trailer for the Alabama Shake. I want that trailer going like this, not like this. I want it flapping up and down, right? And it'll make sense when I show you this Retrieve, but crawl trailers, Chigger Crawl, Pit Boss, and then also good old school chunks. The old chunks are amazing for this technique. And the one thing with the chunks is a lot of times when I'm using a chunk on a football jig or a flipping jig, I'll put it through the fat, right? Like that. But when I'm swimming a chunk with this Alabama Shake, I actually thread it. So I'm threading through the fat of the chunk. I'm utilizing that hook keeper. This is that Missile Mini Swim. And you can look at it now. Look at that. And just like a crawl, you could see that chunk, that's that Berkley Maxent chunk, has a flap. Not a swim, but a flap, okay? So flapping trailers on this bait. And then the Alabama Shake has a totally different Retrieve. Now remember, swimming for submergent cover, we wanted it to get down in the water column, submerged. But now, because we're riding it over top of the pads, of the Kissimmee grass, of the willow grass, of the matted brush, of the trees, we're going to use a totally different Retrieve called the Alabama Shake. And here it goes, guys. For this one, we're going to cast that bait out there, and as soon as it hits the water, we're not going to count the two. We're not going to let it sink. We're not going to let it go to the bottom. As soon as that hits the water, we're going to hold our rod tip a little higher. I like to say that 1 to 2 o'clock. And we're going to start a Retrieve that's shaking and reeling at the same time. Okay? Shaking and reeling at the same time. It's a lot like if you want to do an experiment and see if you're good at it, pat your head and rub your belly at the same time. That's what it's like, okay? So the Alabama Shake, long cast over past that emergent cover. As we come over the emergent cover, our rod's going to be between 1 and 2. We're going to shake and reel at the same time. As we do that, that lure is hopping and popping over that cover. Now listen to me. There's one thing that I do in this Retrieve that breaks that reel shake monotony. And that is if I come to a hole or an edge or an open pocket where that emerge cover stops, right? So if I'm doing this in a lily pad field and it's straight lily pads, except there's a hole about that big, all I'm going to do is this, guys. You ready? Rod 1 to 2, jig hits the water. I instantly start my Retrieve. I reel, I shake, I reel, I shake. If I get to that hole, I pause, I bow down, let it fall a little in that hole. 1, 2 seconds tops. And then put my rod right back up to 1 or 2 and start shaking and reeling again, okay? Shaking and reeling, shaking and reeling. And when we do that, that jig shaking, remember, we've got the crawl on the back, so it's flapping, It's hitting the top of the mat. It's not swimming. We don't want it swimming. We want it hitting. And if there's any hole, pause, let it sink for 1 or 2 seconds, and then bring it right back up. So the Alabama shake for a swim jig when the cover is emerged or emergent cover, the Alabama shake. All right, last but not least, let's talk about rod, reel, line really quick. And swim jig fishing, remember, even with the Missile Mini Swim, that's got a heavy gauge hook on it. And because we're fishing around this cover, you really do have to set the hook pretty hard. You got to jack them. This is like any other skirted jig. And because of that, I'm using a 7.2 to 7.6 medium heavy casting rod. 7.2 to 7.6 medium heavy casting rod. My favorite rod of all time is a 7.4 medium heavy. Ikes series rod. There's a 7.4. It's a great rod for swim jigging. The next thing is the reel. When I'm swim jigging, I don't care if I'm using the Swimming Retrieve for submerged cover or the Alabama Shake for emergent cover, I want a faster gear ratio reel. 8:1 or greater. The Revo Ike 8:1 is a great one. The Xenon, Abu Garcia Xenon, I think it's 8:3 is a great one. So faster retrieve, that's really to help pick up that line. Guys, last but not least is the line. And here's basically what I'm doing. Anytime I'm using the Alabama Shake and keeping that jig on the surface, I'm tying directly to braid. And I'm using 30 to 50 pound Berkley X9 green braid. For the Alabama Shake, it's on the surface. I want that lure to stay on the surface, and I want the strength of braid. I'm tying direct to the swim jig. So 30 to 50 pound Berkley green X9. The 40 pound test is the deal. That's a perfect line because it's right in the middle. But for my submergent swim jig fishing, the swimming the jig, I'm using braid to a short fluorocarbon leader, okay? So I use about a 12 to 18 inch, 12 to 24 inch fluorocarbon leader to that same braid that we just talked about, right? So X9, green braid, 30 to 50 pound test, 40 pounds perfect, to a short leader of fluorocarbon. I'm using Berkley Trilene 100% fluorocarbon, and I'm usually using anywhere between 15 and 20 pound. The 17 pound is perfect, okay? And the reason for that fluorocarbon leader for submergent fishing is I want that to help it get down a little bit. And because the swimming is more important, that little length, even if it's just 12 inches, 20 inches, that little length of fluorocarbon is going to help this bait swim a little better. Generally, too, it's cleaner water when I'm fishing it submergent. So little leader, perfect combination. Man, I hope you enjoyed this one. We got a little in-depth talking about the swim jig and those two main retrieves, swimming a swim jig for submergent cover, Alabama Shake for emergent cover. Hope you like this one. If you like what you're hearing, stop right now. Hit the subscribe button. Subscribe to my channel. If you do that, we'll send you a notification every week. We got a new video posting every week. You're going to be in the loop. If you're already a subscriber, tell your buddies, tell your fishing friends about Mike Iaconelli Fishing on YouTube. We're here to help you hopefully become a better fisherman. So use one of those two retrieves, tie on a swim jig, and good luck. You're going to get your arm ripped off. Bye. Hey everybody, Mike Iaconelli. I hope you enjoyed this week's In the Shop. I hope you learned a little bit. And if you like these videos, remember, there's a whole boatload. Check out these two, and you're going to learn more about bass fishing.